All rise. Fifth Circuit Court, I declare it now in session. Honorable Roy G. Minks presiding.
You may be seated. In the case of the People versus Timothy William Calloway.
Yes, sir.
Counsel identify for the record, please.
Gerald White, representing Mr. Callaway.
All right, and you are Timothy William Calloway?
Yes, sir.
And you're currently on probation for felonious assault, a felony that carries a maximum penalty of 4 years in prison. The minimum is discretionary with the court. 13 count violation has been filed against you. Mr. White, have you received that 13 count violation allegation?
I have, Your Honor.
Have you talked it over with your client?
I have. But I indicate to the court that as I read the probation violation, I note that the dates seem to be incorrect, Your Honor. I note that many of the charges indicate a September 2021 date, which can't be true.
Well, that's true. It does say that. And that looks like count 9 and 10 and 11. And we'll have probation check those out and amend them.
Okay. Your Honor, I have discussed the various allegations in the probation violation with Mr. Callaway. He indicates to me he is currently serving a jail sentence in Shiawassee County for domestic violence, habitual second. He has an out date of December 7 of 2021 in Shiawassee. He asks as to whether or not his probation can be transferred to Shiawassee because he no longer has any ties with Clear County. That's the basic information that I've gained from Mr. Callaway at this point in time.
All right. Have you talked with Mr. McConnell at all, Mr. White?
No, I have not, Your Honor.
Okay. So we'll enter not guilty pleas at this time on his behalf, and we'll set this for a status conference. Would you like to have a status conference set next week, say next Wednesday?
Yeah, that'd be appropriate, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, we'll set a status conference next Wednesday at 10 o'clock. And hopefully you can talk to Mr. McConnell by then and he can get an amended done.
Very good. That would be appropriate, I think.
All right. Anything further?
Not for me, Your Honor. Thank you.
You're all set, Mr. Callett.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you later, Timothy.
All right, thank you.
I'll check the zooming in.
She's in the courthouse right now.
Oh, she's in the courthouse? Okay.
Was earlier.
She may be in district court doing finger check.
I don't know. We'll take a short recess and when she comes in, if you and Mr. Hyde and Ms. Thompson can come back and we'll talk in chambers.
Thank you.
All rise.
I will probably put them.
All rise. Fifth Circuit Court back in session. Honorable Roy G. Minks presiding.
You may be seated. On the case of Kimberly Hagan Terracino versus Stephanie M. Dennis, counsel identify for the record, please.
Please report Michael Hyde on behalf of
Kimberly Terracino.
Thank you, Your Honor. Karen Tomczyk on behalf of Stephanie Dennis.
We've had some meetings in chambers. We could try and settle this, and parties have made attempts at it. Anyway, it's not going to be settled today. We've had some discussions in chambers about each side putting forth an offer of proof and then going to argument. Is that what you wish to do, Mr. Hyde?
Yes, Your Honor.
And is that what you wish to do, Ms. Tomczyk?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed.
Your Honor, as you know, this is a relatively long-standing case with these PPOs and violations and the renewal of a PPO. My client versus the respondent, Stephanie Dennis. I have the benefit of coming on just new. I haven't lived with it as long as you have. In this instance, during the last, or maybe second to last violation, show cause for a violation of PPO, Your Honor sentenced the respondent to, I believe, 45 days in jail. During that time period when she was in jail, Ms. Dennis communicated directly with Mr. Terracino. She thought, and I'll agree with Ms. Tomczyk, that she may have thought that it was Mr. Terracino's phone. The reality is that my client, Kim Terracino, owns the phone. She owns all of the phones and the numbers. And that number was originally her phone number that Ms. Dennis was calling. There is an order from the friend of the court and through signed by Judge Marcy Klaus that all communications by either while she is incarcerated are to go through the friend of the court or the Department of Health and Human Services. Ms. Dennis chose to bypass that order and communicate directly with my client, requesting video conferences with the children and requesting money to be placed on her account. That is a direct violation of the PPO and may possibly be a violation of other court orders from other courts in this building. But the bottom line is that Ms. Dennis continues to do things that demonstrates that she has very little respect for the orders of the court. And we would ask that Your Honor impose a sanction that would hopefully send a message to Ms. Dennis that she needs to understand the orders of the court and obey them. Thank you.
Ms. Tomczyk?
Yes, Your Honor. In this case, I think, obviously, Your Honor, we agree that the messages were sent from the jail. It was to a phone number that Mr. Terracino has provided to the friend of the court as his phone number. I would note to the court that the court can review the file and not necessarily, this wasn't an extension of a personal protection order, the other one had lapsed and there was a brief time period where there wasn't one. But with this personal protection order, the phone number that Ms. Terracino provided is a different number. Also, she listed that number on the motion for show cause, Your Honor. My client has no way to know who owns the phones with the married couple. The messages were not sent. There was nothing referencing Ms. Terracino. This court indicated to Ms. Terracino at the last hearing that the PPO does not prevent contact from Mr. Terracino. This court cannot punish my client for what may or may not be a violation of another court's order. That needs to be hashed out in those courts, Your Honor, because those courts are the ones that have those orders and what was told to the parties, Your Honor. The fact is that my client had parenting time that was to be set up via video. She was in jail. She had to set up an account. She set up that account. When she set it up, asking the request, it was sent to the phone number, Your Honor. And so in that, this is a difficult case in the fact that we have a protected party being the married spouse of somebody that my client has children with. And so there's contact and then there's, you know, when you got kids, there's contact, things come up, there's a bunch of different orders that these people are operating under, Your Honor, but this order specifically says that my client does not have contact with Kimberly Terracino. My client did not knowingly make contact with Kimberly Terracino. She sent it to a number that she knew to be Eric Terracino's. Ms. Terracino provided a different phone number via court documents to my client.
Argument?
Yes, Your Honor. Number one, I would like to point out that the current address of my client is confidential because of the violations that Ms. Dennis has made in the past. In addition, I would like to point out that a phone number placed on a court document is often not placed there because it's the number that has to be called or give the respondent, you know, access to a number to continue to harass, because I was problem in the past as well. The texting, the phone calls, the harassment over the phone. So just because there's a different phone number does not mean that the number that's used for friend of court purposes is not a valid number as well for my client. The other piece is that, as Ms. Township alluded to, there is no contact between Ms. Dennis and Mr. Terracino through the district court, Judge Farrell. And, although this is not a violation before Judge Farrell at this time, it does definitely violate the no contact with his court. So she continues to demonstrate to the court a lack of understanding or a lack of willingness to abide by the orders of the court. The arguments that Ms. Tomczyk has made would have more merit if there was, you know, just simply an ongoing friend of the court case at this point. But there is not. Ms. Dennis has violated the friend of the court order by communicating directly, you know, outside of the friend of the court or the DHS. She's violated Judge Farrell's order. She's violated your order. She's just not giving the message. In addition, I believe in previous court hearings, Your Honor has indicated that no communication whatsoever is to be allowed, and calling a family phone obviously indicates that there's no communication, or texting a family phone indicates a willingness to violate that instruction. So again, we would ask that we impose a sanction designed to educate Ms. Dennis. Thank you.
Your Honor, this court has made it clear that there's no contact with Kimberly Terracino. The contact was not with Kimberly Terracino, it was with Eric Terracino, who my client shares children with. I would note that although, you know, looking at the court documents, it may not be the, you know, end all be all, Your Honor, but that's something that is what an individual files with the court. They say this is a good number to reach me at. And this is a situation, Your Honor, where the opposing side can say there's clear violations of other court orders, but we don't have those court orders, Your Honor. So there is not clear violations of those other court orders. Even in looking at, Your Honor, I do see that, you know, I have been provided to review the custody order, Your Honor, but there's still things that aren't taken into account in that written order, and the fact that, Your Honor, with video contact into the jail, the account still has to be set up. Somebody in the jail has to set that account up. The DHS isn't going to go in the jail. The friend of the court's not going to go into the jail, Your Honor. And so looking at this as a whole, Your Honor, it's not that Ms. Dennis is simply saying, screw the court, I'm going to do what I want. No, she's trying to abide by all of the court orders in front of her. She's trying to have a relationship with her children. She's been having that relationship. My understanding has been going well with expanded parenting time. Ms. Dennis gets it. She constantly, every time I talk to her, one of the first things she says to me, I don't want contact with them. I want this to be over. I just want things to be done, Your Honor. And I would note, in looking at this, Your Honor, I have not heard of any additional violations in this. So I would say that, like I said, this, at most, it was an inadvertent contact, Your Honor, with a phone that's shared between parties, that my client still has to have some type of relationship and contact with Mr. Terracino. And I would note that, like I said, again, this is not contact that specifically addressed Ms. Terracino. She didn't say, tell Kimberly X, Y, and Z, Your Honor. It was messages that were sent up to say that the account is set up. You know, the account needs to be funded.
Final word, Mr. Hyde?
You know, my client did provide a number to the friend of the court, upon order by Judge Klaus. He was instructed to provide a phone number to the friend of the court for friend of the court purposes. That doesn't initiate the attempts to communicate with him or with Mrs. Terracino. There are numerous no contact orders out there between the parties, all parties. And Ms. Dennis's attempts to circumvent one order by violating another order or not violating this order, going around the corner, it still comes down to the fact that there are alternatives for her to do. She could have had the assistance of someone in jail to set it up. She could have had communicated with the court to help her set it up. She had lots of opportunities. The order itself specifically says that any communication between them should be between the friend of the court or the HHS. DHS goes into the jail often. You know, that's not an unusual thing. I've been there. So whether Ms. Dennis believed that it was Mr. Terracino's phone number or not is not the point. The point is that Kimberly Terracino owns both numbers. The court ordered Mr. Terracino to provide a number to the friend of the court. He did. That's where that number came from. Mrs. Terracino has chosen to put a number on her PPO applications and on the notice of violation, number that yes, she owns, but is not publicly available. And obviously she didn't want to give a number to Ms. Dennis to use, especially when her address currently is confidential. So taking all of that into consideration, Your Honor, it's still a clear violation. And she did it while she was in jail serving time for the last violation. So she wasn't getting that message. Thank you.
Court's going to take a few minutes and recess and think about this and review the file more before it makes a decision. We're in recess.
All rise. All rise. Court is back in session. Honorable Judge Roy G. Mink presiding.
May be seated. Like reviewed the file. And actually went and reviewed the file from the last PPO, case number 20-900115-PH. That PPO had expired. As far as findings of facts, Dennis was in the jail. She contacted Mr. Terracino phone, set up contact for children through HomeWave, assistance. It's undisputed that that contact occurred. She claims that she thought it was his phone. I think this court occurred back in April 2021. Court's review of the records and prior hearings appears that she knew that the phone, or should have known, easily, I believe known, because it seems in other hearings that came up that she knew the phone was owned by Ms. Hagan Terracino. And the court understands that, yes, she wanted contact with her children, and that's an important factor. But she should have went around and did it a different way. The court finds beyond a reasonable doubt that she violated the personal protection order in this case. I'll maybe put a sentencing on this on a motion day, or would you like the parties to set up a date that's agreeable to both the council for sentencing? I'm not going to go forward with sentencing today.
Yeah, we can, I prefer a date that matches both.
All right, so I direct you to contact Ms. Ruppert, the assignment clerk, and set up a date for the sentencing, preferably in September. I don't think there's much time into this month. It have to be the second 2 weeks of September. All right. We're in recess.
All rise. All rise. 50th Circuit Court is on session. I'm Roy G. Mink presiding.
May be seated. On the case of Alicia Lane versus Michael Swatch. Counsel identify for the record, please.
Chief Assistant Prosecuting Attorney Alicia Schwartz appearing on behalf of the people.
Your Honor, Austin R. Rowe. Austin R. Rowe appearing on behalf of Mr. Squawk.
You are Mr. Swatch.
Michael Lee Schwach, correct, sir.
All right. This was set as a hearing for a violation of a personal protection order. Have the parties talked about a resolution of this?
We have not, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor, I've talked to Mr. Squawk and he's telling me he doesn't want to plead to anything.
All right. Are you prepared to go forward with the hearing today, Ms. Schwartz?
Your Honor, in this particular case, we did not receive notice of the hearing today. I apologize for that. I did not have the opportunity to subpoena witnesses to be present here today. So in light of those circumstances, I would ask that the hearing be adjourned and set for a different date at time so I can appropriately subpoena the necessary witnesses.
All right. Court will adjourn this hearing and set it approximately 30 days out. We'll send the notice to all the parties when the next hearing date is.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Think this can be done in an hour, Mr. Rowe?
It could probably be done in an hour, yes, Your Honor.
You agree, Ms. Schwartz?
Yes.
All right, so we'll set the time for about an hour for a hearing. All right, we're all set.
Thank you.
We're in the right.
All rise, 55th Circuit is now in session with the Honorable Roy G. Mink presiding.
May be seated. On the cases of People versus Christine Lillian Howell, counsel identify for the record.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Todd Diedrich appearing on behalf of Ms. Howell.
And you are Christine Lillian Howell?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And as I understand it, you're not ready to go forward on anything. Is that correct, Mr. Diedrich?
Correct, Your Honor. I have been in contact with her attorney in Roscommon
The
County.
reason for today's hearing was to do an arraignment because we had these bench warrants out for her arrest. And she's never been arraigned on them, and we found out that she's up in Roscommon.
Okay.
So basically, I just wanted to get it on the record that we arraigned her and that she would. The last one was her failure to appear at arraignment. We did a bench warrant back in probation violation back in March 22nd of 2021. And then we set up for arraignment and then she failed to appear at that. And so then another bench warrant was issued for her arrest. So she's got 2 failure to appears. The one is a 1-count violation. I don't know if you have that probation violation in front of you from the March 22nd PV.
I unfortunately, I think the one I have is from March 16th, Your Honor.
March
Got it.
16th? All right.
Yes, but I got 21 counts.
Yes, and then another one was issued after that. And so we still haven't resolved anything on any of them. So basically, I just wanted to get it that she's being arraigned on this other one. And I will dismiss the contempt of court charge for her failure to appear on May 10th. And so we just have the 2 probation violations. And then we'll just send her not guilty pleas on her behalf at this point.
We're also willing to, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to advise the court that we were willing to waive the statutory time period for a hearing because she has apparently some other matters pending in 2 other counties that need to be resolved as well, Judge.
All right. That works. I think the bond on these last 2 probation violations is only set at $500 each cash. So she had posted the other one, the 21 count violations. And so you're thinking you're going to need about 60 or 90 days to find out what happens on the other cases?
Well, so our original thought was to meet again next Friday, as I had, which is the 27th, just to see if we could at least do an update. I have been in contact with her attorney in Roscommon and just found out that there's another case in Bay County.
I think you moved your head, Mr. Dietrich, so you're not listening. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me, Judge?
Now we can, yes.
Sorry.
Sort of lost you.
All right. Her next court date in Roscommon is not until October, but we had talked about having a status conference next Friday, which was the 27th, I believe, just to see what I can find out in the next week or so. If the court's willing to do that, I'm already there on Friday anyway.
Okay, sure, we can do that. We can do it as a status conference. Are you gonna need Ms. Howell to be written for that and have her appear on Zoom, or you just want to do that status conference with the probation department and the court?
It would be nice to have her if possible, just because that way I can find out if she learned anything in the interim as well. But if it's a difficulty, then, you know, I'm sure I can.
It's just a matter of filing the writ, and then it's a matter of whether Roscommon has the ability to Zoom at that date and time.
If we could try to have her.
But sometimes they get booked up and then, or they say they can't do it.
I'm very understanding of the situation, Your Honor. So if we can try to have her there, that's great. If it's not possible, then that's fine. It's just a status conference.
Okay, will do.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. We're in recess.
Thank you. All rise.
Yeah, this is you right here.
Okay.
That's great. That's you, and this will be the judge next to it. And then that's the courtroom, and then Todd. So
Okay.
I just unmuted you. So. I'll let you do something.
Can you hear us?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, your appearance?
Thank you, Your Honor. Todd Dietrich appearing on behalf of Mr. Tim Silman.
All right,
And I'm sorry, but he is appearing from my office in another room.
all right. You are Tim Stillman?
Yes, sir.
All right. There's no proof of service upon Kimberly Longhorn or Matthew Steele, so those won't be heard today. You'll have to get proof of service and set up a new court date for those, Mr. Painter.
Your Honor, can I speak on that one thing? The last name is spelled Lawhorn.
Langhorn?
On the paper, it says Longhorn, Long, and it's Law.
That happens when people print and sometimes it doesn't come out right. But still, there's no proof of service in the file, so you will have to reset a new date and get proof of service if you want to continue to get those. All right. Mr. Painter, would you raise your right be sworn?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Mr. Silman, would you raise your right hand and be sworn?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
We'll say this, Mr. Painter, you're entitled to have an attorney represent you on this matter. If you wish to have one, the court would adjourn this if you request time to retain one. You want to adjourn this or go continue on?
Continue on.
All right. Is everything you wrote in your petition true?
Yes.
All right. And you know Tim Silman?
Yes.
And how do you know him?
Through my brother-in-law,
All right.
Robert Einstein.
And he stated that he has threatened you. Is that correct? And he's harassed you.
Yes, several times.
All right. And when was the last time that he threatened you? Do you know the date and time?
I don't know the date, time. It's here recently since he's been out of the hospital.
A week ago, 2 weeks ago,
It's
a month
about
ago?
a month ago now.
All right.
Your Honor, he also had called the marshal and told the marshals that I was absconded. And the marshal told me that I had somebody out for me to watch my back. And
All right, that's hearsay at this point. You know, what the process here is, you have to show the reasons why you want a personal protection order, okay? And it has to fit within the statutes. So the process is I will question you.
Okay.
And then Mr. Dietrich will have an opportunity to question you, okay? And then at some point, I'll give you an opportunity to just say whatever you think else is needed to be said, all right? So you said that the latest incident was about a month ago.
Yes.
And where did that occur at?
That occurred at, he lives at 1090, I live at 1200.
So it occurred there right at the property?
Yes.
And is he on his property, you on your property,
He
or?
was on his property.
Huh?
He was on his property, sir.
Okay, and were you on your property?
No,
Okay, so you were on your property or something else?
I was on 1100 and 1200 that took together. I'm a caregiver for my brother-in-law.
Okay, so you're on one side of the property line, he's on the other. Okay, what happened?
He's making threats, you know, it's not the first time he's made verbal things.
All right, let's tell me what kind of threat did he make?
Well, for one, he threatened me to get
What was the threat?
that he would kill or shoot me, jump me. I was always told to watch my back, which he is PSGD or whatever it is. And,
Did he say that he has PSTD and he'll?
oh, he said it before, yes.
Okay.
And I fear for my life.
All right, so you're afraid of him,
Yes,
all right? And he threatened to shoot you in the guts? Is that-
he had mentioned to my nephew, he wanted my nephew to shoot me in the gut.
Oh.
Which is in the other PPO, which is my witnesses that had that.
Okay, did you bring any witnesses here today?
I have no witness here today, but this sign.
Okay, so then
PPO.
basically, we can't hear hearsay.
Right,
It's only what you heard from him and what he said to you, okay? It's not what he said to other people,
Yes,
it's
sir.
not
I understand.
what you said to other people, okay? All right. So how many times would you say that he's threatened you?
It's been 3 times, 4 times in the past couple of years, just to get mad or something and just throw threats out there. I just been keeping it peace.
And each time it was a threat to kill you?
Wasn't a threat to kill me, it's threatening with my life, different things.
And the first time he threatened you, you told him not to talk to you?
I didn't say that to him.
All right, well. It says here in the questionnaire, when did you tell the person not to contact you?
That's just here recently,
Just recently, okay. Just this year,
yes.
all right. As far as this year goes, how many times has he threatened you?
Just hit one time.
Just the one time? And since you told him not to contact you, has he contacted you?
No,
No.
just verbal words. And I
Okay, in the petition, it asks the question, what occurred after you told the person not to contact you? And you wrote down, he still came around. What did you mean by that?
Still coming on the property and drive by, he said stuff, laughs, and said you stupid MFer and all this stuff. And that's just the last thing.
Mr. Dietrich, can you hear all this?
It's very quiet, Your Honor. If Mr. Painter could kindly speak up, I would appreciate it.
Speak up or get closer to the microphone, Mr. Painter. You've got a soft voice. So as far as this year goes, he's made comments, but he's only threatened you one time?
Yes, he's made tons of comments. But,
And these are derogatory comments?
yes.
All right. Mr. Dietrich, any questions?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Mr. Painter, you live in a camper or a trailer on your brother-in-law's property, is that correct?
It's considered as a trailer, it's a camper, the trailer thing.
Okay, so it's a trailer on your brother-in-law's property, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And your brother-in-law is Mr. Stillman's uncle, is that correct?
I do believe so, yes, sir.
And Mr. Stillman's property that he owns is right next to his uncle's property that you live on, correct?
Yes.
And how long would you say that you feel you've been afraid of Mr. Stillman?
I've been afraid of it since I've known him. It's just a feeling.
And how long have you known him?
For going on 4 years now. I'll be up here 4 years in October.
Now, is it true, sir, that you and your brother-in-law, his name is Dean Heinzelman, is that correct?
Robert Dean Heinzman.
Does he go by Dean?
Yes, he does.
So you, Dean, and Mr. Stillman all own cattle and livestock, is that correct?
He has cattle on his side and we have our livestock on our side.
And in the past year and a half or so, is it true that Mr. Stillman has helped you and Dean with your cattle?
He's helped Mr. Dean because the cattle wasn't mine. And Dean's cattle.
And were you using, do you help take care of Dean's cattle?
Now I do, yes.
And is it true that you have taken Dean's cattle onto Mr. Stillman's property for grazing?
No, the cattle had broke the fencing. I did not put them over there. They went through the fencing. And the only time they went through the fencing is when Mr. Tim and Matthew Steele was out there and they ran through the fence when they had them out there. I didn't put them over there on his property, no, sir.
Did you travel with Mr. Stillman last year to go get feed for your hogs and cattle?
No, he's been getting his own. I buy my own feed. I get my own feed.
All right, so your testimony under oath is that you've never traveled with him in his vehicle to go get feed?
No, I have not.
Did Mr. Stillman build pens for your hogs?
No, the pens had been built for me. Robert Heinzman had built them pens. When Tim came in, he put a couple boards up for stabilizing, but he did not help build the pens.
And Mr. Heinzelman, he's in the hospital right now, is that correct?
Yes, he is.
Now, you mentioned that he threatened you. Was that through your nephew?
No, that's his hearsay. It's through me.
Okay. And
Nothing.
you're aware, you mentioned that Mr. Stillman,
Mr. Diedrich, he mentioned something about he's trying to get his nephew to kill him, but I said that was hearsay and he couldn't say that. All
okay,
right?
thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Painter, you're aware that Mr. Stillman was in the hospital this year, correct?
Yes, sir.
You recall how long he was in the hospital for?
No, I didn't pay attention for it.
Since April 7th, do you know how long Mr. Stillman has been on his property?
No.
Has anyone talked to you about trying to get a PPO against Mr. Stillman?
No, I did it on my own for my own protection.
At this time, I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Painter, is there anything Are there other facts that you want to testify to about conduct with or interaction with Mr. Silman?
No, not at this moment, no.
All right.
Just gonna feel safe.
Okay, and you don't have any witnesses here today?
I have no witness.
All right. Did you want to call Mr. Silman as a witness or let Mr. Diedrich call his own witness?
Mr. Diedrich call his own witness?
All right, you want to call any witnesses, Mr. Diedrich?
Yes, Your Honor, I call Mr. Stillman.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Stillman, you own property and you reside on property that's next to your uncle named Dean Heinzelman, is that correct?
Yes,
And is it true that Mr. Painter lives on that property in some type of camper or trailer?
yes,
And do you and your uncle and Mr. Painter work with cattle and livestock together?
yes.
And how long have the three of you been doing that?
2 years.
And what kind of things do the three of you do together when it comes to the livestock?
Build fences, clean the barnyards where they graze.
Have you ever taken Mr. Painter to go get feed for the livestock?
Yes,
When was that?
March of 2021, earlier this year.
And was Mr. Painter in the same vehicle as you?
Yes,
And how is it that why were you driving? How did that all come about?
it was my turn to use my vehicle.
Had you guys traveled there at other times in the same vehicle?
Yes,
And so you took turns driving to go get the feed?
yes,
And have you observed Mr. Painter grazing cattle on your land?
yes.
Was that a problem for you, or did you not like that or want that to happen?
No, I gave him permission.
And when was the last time Mr. Painter grazed the cattle on your land?
October of 2020, he sold the cattle that was on there.
That was on your land?
Yes,
And it was not a problem. You were okay with them having the cattle on your land. Is that correct?
yes,
And is Mr. Painter crossed onto your property to care for the animals during that time period?
yes.
Has Mr. Painter ever communicated to you that he was afraid of you?
Not at all.
Has he ever communicated to you that he wanted nothing to do with you or that he didn't want you to contact him personally?
No,
When you got this petition for personal protection order, how did you feel about that?
hurt, shock,
Have you ever threatened Mr. Painter?
no,
Did you tell anybody else that you were going to hurt Mr. Painter?
never.
And you also just recently, about the exact same time, your uncle's wife had filed a PPO against you as well. Is that correct?
Correct,
So both and that would be Mr. Painter's sister, correct?
correct.
And so you heard him testify that he's never been on your property, never grazed animals on your property. But your testimony is that he has. Is that correct?
Yes,
And he testified that he's never been in your car to go get feed for animals, but your testimony is that he has. Is that correct?
yes,
Now, earlier this year, you caught COVID. Is that correct?
yes.
And do you recall the date that you caught COVID?
I was diagnosed April 7th of 2021.
And did you end up in the hospital?
Yes,
And what day do you recall going into the hospital?
April 9th,
Yeah. Excuse me. At what point, or what hospital were you in?
St. Joe Mercy Hospital in Pontiac, Michigan.
And from April 9th of 2021, what day were you discharged from that hospital?
June 1st of 2021.
So just like about 60 days or so?
Correct.
So for 60 days, you're in the hospital with COVID, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you almost die?
Yes, twice. Well, in fact, they said I was dead
Were you placed on ventilators?
2 times.
And when you got out of the hospital on June 1st, where did you go to reside at that point in time?
I stayed in Pontiac.
And so starting June 1st until when did you leave moving from Pontiac?
July 19th of 2021.
So just about a month ago?
Yes,
And had you been to your home here in Clare County since April 9th, 2021?
no,
So from April 9th, 2021 until July 19th, 2021, you hadn't even stepped foot in Clare County, is that correct?
that's correct.
When you came back to Clare County, how long were you back?
3 days.
And then what did you do, sir?
I traveled to the Upper Peninsula.
And how long were you in the Upper Peninsula?
1 week.
So that would be from about July 22nd or so through the 29th.
Correct.
And then about 3 days later, Mr. Painter filed this complaint against you. Is that correct?
Yes,
And his testimony was about a month before that you had made threats against him. Is that correct?
yes,
Had you even been in Clare County at that time frame?
no,
How did having COVID affect your health? Did it affect your health in any way?
yes.
And can you describe in what ways it affected your health?
It left pneumonia in my lungs. I lost 30% of my right lung. I had to have decortization, major surgery on my lungs 2 different times. And it left me permanently disabled.
Did it affect your strength?
Yes, I have absolutely no strength.
Did it affect your ability to breathe?
Yes,
So as far as you knew, were you and Mr. Painter on friendly terms?
yes,
And you said you were hurt and surprised at the allegations, correct?
correct.
Your testimony is also that you never threatened Mr. Painter, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any desire to threaten Mr. Painter?
Never.
Have you ever said hurtful things to him?
No.
So as far as you knew, you thought you were friends, correct?
Correct.
Now, we had anticipated calling your uncle here today as a witness as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But he ended up in the hospital in an emergency situation. Is that correct?
Yes,
And he's basically your next door neighbor that you've known your whole life, correct?
yes,
And Mr. Painter is just simply living on a trailer or camper on Mr. Heinzelman's property, correct?
yes,
Are you asking the court to not grant the petition for personal protection order?
yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Painter, do you have any questions for Mr. Silman?
Yes, Your Honor, with the cattle situation being on his property,
No, I asked if you have a question for him. That means if you have a question, you ask him a question. You don't get to
okay,
talk about anything. After we're done with the questioning, then you'll get an opportunity to explain stuff, okay?
I have no questions this time, Your Honor.
All right, no questions. All right. Any other witnesses, Mr. Diedrich? Apparently.
No, Your Honor.
All right. Closing argument, Mr. Painter.
Okay, closing argument. The thing with that, I guess I come up with a story here. The thing with the cattle stuff had nothing to do with me. That was between him and his uncle. They were doing that together. And that property, the decision of me putting that up, it was between him and his uncle. I had nothing to do with it. It's just like now with these, I have nothing to do with it. They're not my cattle. They're Mr. Robert Heinzman. And when we talked to Robert Heinzman this morning, he said that he wasn't going to come because he didn't want to be involved. He don't want nothing to do with it because he don't want to pick sides. Before I got him up there, didn't instruct to go to the hospital. He had told me that. He said, I don't want nothing to do with it. Mr. Selman called him, or Dietrich, one of the people called him yesterday, and he said that he didn't want nothing to do with it. He's just staying out. But the thing with the cows, I never went and got feed. It was always Matt Steele and his daughters always went and got feed, or it was Tim and Matt went and got feed. I never went and got feed with Tim. And with the fixing the barn up in the barn, it was me and Mariah Ramskin and Heinzman. P. Heinzman is my witness who built them pins.
Anything else you wish to say?
Not as I can think of.
And you still feel threatened by Mr.
Yes.
Selman? Closing argument, Mr. Dietrich?
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, it's somewhat a little conflicting. Obviously, the court's got to determine, who's telling the truth, but what we have is Mr. Selman, his next door neighbors with his uncle, they've been in this relationship all of Mr. Selman's life. Mr. Painter is residing on Mr. Selman's uncle's property right next door. Mr. Selman testified that they've all worked together on having cattle and livestock, taking turns getting feed for each other. That when he learned about the PPO, it hurt his feelings. It was a little confusing to me was it was the PPO petition states it was signed on September 2nd, 2021. I'm assuming that was a scrivener's error. It probably should have been August 2nd. And one of the things that Mr. Painter had alleged was that this event had occurred about a month before. Mr. Selman has been recovering from COVID. He's in the hospital for about 60 days. I mean, from my own personal experience, I just got over COVID a couple weeks ago, and I'm having a hard time. I cough and I lose my breath, and so I know the effects of this thing. It can make you weak. You don't feel good. And Mr. Selman, I think, has very similar, if not worse, conditions than I had, and it just doesn't add up. I was told that we were going to try to get Mr. Heinzelman in today, but he ended up in an emergency situation in the hospital, is my understanding, and so we couldn't get him here. And then it's also interesting that since, Mr. Painter's even aware that I had this conversation with Mr. Heinzelman because, of course, nobody really wants to get involved in between the family things, but when you need to have people tell the truth and have the truth come out, you got to try to make that happen. So if the court is going to consider granting the PPO, we might ask for adjournment to allow that to happen. But otherwise, we'd simply ask the court to deny the PPO at this point in time. They are neighbors. I thought one of the other interesting things was Mr. Painter said that he told Mr. Selman to leave him alone and that Mr. Selman still gave him a hard time. But today in the testimony, he said that once he told him to leave me alone, that Mr. Selman stopped. So that never happened again. So it's a little confusing and conflicting on behalf of some of the facts put forth by Mr. Painter. And they're obviously at very polar ends of the situation, but Mr. Selman has not presented any evidence or hasn't presented any testimony that is conflicting to his own, where Mr. Painter has presented conflicting testimony from his petition. So I would ask the court to take that into consideration and deny the personal protection order.
Full argument, Mr. Painter?
Yes, this is not true. Stuff that I put out there is the truth. I feel for my life, and Phil threatened, he's threatened me many times, many people, but we kept peace because of Robert Heinz, because he was in the hospital about that, on his deathbed, and then put in the nursing home in our hospital. So we kept the peace. Well, it kept coming. So Robert Heinzman yelled at me, he yelled at Chris, he yelled at everybody else, but he said, well, I'll talk to Tim, which he never did. So that's why it escalated to this, because we had taken it into our own hand to get this done. You know, it's just trying to keep peace, and with the threats and stuff like that, we don't feel safe.
Court's gonna deny the petition, mostly because, you lack dates or times of when this stuff occurred. It's pretty clear that he was in the hospital for a period of time, and he was not in the area, from his testimony, that you allege one of the things occurred. And I know it's hard for people to remember dates and times sometimes, and nobody wants to carry around a pen and pad of paper to write stuff down, but sometimes it's necessary. So just because of some of the conflict in the evidence, the court's just gonna not grant the PPO at this time. The court will warn you, Mr. Silman, that if you are making threats, you need to stop, all right? Because if he comes back and asks and he has proof of you making threats, then a PPO may issue. All right, and if there's enough evidence there, a stalking charge of harassment, criminal statute could be violated. So I'll tell the both of you, you need to be civil to each other. Your next door neighbors. If you can't be civil, you can't be nice and say hi or bye, then don't talk or make any gestures. That's the civil way to do it. We're in recess.
All rise.